Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of the Bleed Los Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by our good friends at FOCO, FOCO.com, FOCO. For being a loyal listener to this podcast, if you click on the link describing the podcast, it'll take you to FOCO's website. Add whatever you want to the cart, and that's it. You'll get a discount for being a loyal listener to this here Bleed Los Podcast. So huge thanks to FOCO. They have a fantastic selection of bobbleheads, Dodgers merchandise, shoes, Hawaiian shirts, sombreros. They got it all. So check it out. FOCO.com. Huge thanks to them for the support. Terms and conditions do apply. Please see their website for further details. Again, FOCO. And our good friends at Bleed Los. Same exact name as us, just not a podcast. www.bleedlos.com. They have all of the Dodger fandom clothing you can think of. Joe Kelly Fight Club shirt in preparation for that Houston Astros series. You can get it there. You can get Walker F. and Bueller shirts, to support the man. You can get them there. Bleedlos.com. For being a loyal listener to this here podcast, if you use the code BleedLosPod, you will save 10% on your purchase. Again, terms and conditions do apply. Please see their store for more details. Bleedlos.com. Huge thanks to them. And huge thanks to you guys, the supporters, subscribers, reviewers, listeners, followers of this here podcast. If it wasn't for you guys, honestly, we wouldn't be where we are right now. So huge thanks to each and every one of you. Please, if you haven't, subscribe, review, follow the Twitter account at BleedLosPod. And we're also on Instagram now. Same handle at BleedLosPod. So please give us a follow. Shoot us questions, shoot the breeze with us, and we'll gladly engage. But for now, here's another edition of the Bleed Los Podcast.
Hey fans, this is Todd Lights, public address announcer for your world champion Los Angeles Dodgers, and you are listening to the Bleed Los Podcast with your hosts Alonso and Juan, with the babyface gimmick in the sky, Roger.
And here we are, Juan. The sky is no longer falling. 7-0, or rather 7 in a row, I should say. Just swept the San Francisco Giants. They couldn't beat LA. See what I did there?
I see you. I applaud you.
It's BLA.
Oh
BLA. BLA.
The
shirts are available at bleedlos.com.
Yes, the grammar police has arrived. 7 in a row. Like the sky is no longer falling. It looks like things are starting to turn around. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic. Not only is it 7 in a row, it's 11 out of the last 12. You know what I'm really curious about, Alonso, is this is how this season's going to go. They started out 13-2 and then lost 15 of their next 20. And now they've won 11 out of 12. Do you think it's just going to be an up and down year for this team? Or do you think maybe it took those 20 games for them to get adjusted to all the injuries that they went through? And now they're like, we're going to roll with what we got.
I think it's a little bit of column A and column B. Obviously, the injuries are starting to work themselves out, and unfortunately, there is going to be continuations of injuries. But all in all, I think they were able to weather the storm as best as they could, and I ultimately think this is just kind of also the offense clicking at the right time. Because if you recall, they were in a slump, and they were in a really bad offensive slump because the pitching has remained consistent, and obviously – best rotation in baseball, no question. It's not even close. Even with all the injuries, it's still not even close. Trevor Bauer had himself a weekend, but it's one of those things where those injuries are obviously that they're going to keep rearing their ugly head because as we saw today, the Sunday game, Mookie Betts was scratched because of his shoulder. So it's kind of I feel like there's going to be lingering kind of things that are going to catch up with everyone. But if everyone can stay kind of at this plateau, if you will, then I think all in all, I think we should be good. Because, I mean, the offense today didn't have any issues with the offense today on Sunday here in San Francisco. So, I mean, I felt good about it. I am curious to hear one thing from you, though. Who to you has stood out the most over the last, to kind of go back with your stat over the last 12 games.
Oh, dude, Jeopardy style. Who is Max Muncie? I mean, Max Muncie, what he's doing, and Max Muncie is one of at least one of my favorite whipping boys on this show because I was concerned about him. And it's funny because to me, Muncie has kind of mirrored what the Dodgers are this year. He has these hot streaks and then he has these cold streaks. And now he's in a ridiculous hot streak. I mean, he's the team leader in home runs. He's got 10 home runs. But this is the thing that impresses me the most. On May 14th, about 10 days ago, Max Muncie was hitting 243. Max Muncie's hitting 292 now. That's almost 50 points. That's ridiculous and I know it's still early in the season, but do you realize how incredibly hot you need to be to raise your batting average 50 points? I mean, Max Muncie he's just doing the damage right now. So that's my vote is Max Muncie. Now, will Muncie, come back down to earth? Probably, yes. I mean, and you've talked about this many times on the show, Alonso. Max Muncie is not a guy who's going to hit for average. It seems like consistently you're going to get the power from him, but in terms of the average, that's not who he is. But right now, he is no matter what shift you put on him, he's seeing the ball really, really well right now.
When Max is seeing the ball the way that he is right now, just get out of the way. That's one of kind of been the knocks on him kind of throughout his career as he's been relatively inconsistent. And, like we've talked about, he's not going to hit for average, but when he lays wood on the ball, it's a wrap. That home run that he hit, I think Saturday, that went into the Cove. That's the longest home run I've ever seen hit in that ballpark, at least in the water. And I mean, that was a bomb, but I mean, that shows you, that he's just locked in right now. And all kudos in the world to Max, because again, he's not known for his average, but he is known just for that compact swing and being able to get contact. But he had himself a hell of a weekend too.
Yeah. And who's another guy that I think deserves a little love, at least offensively?
Who's that?
Is Will Smith. Will Smith, you look at his batting average on May 11th, he was hitting 242. Today he's hitting 279. I mean, that's almost 40 points. Again, these guys are hitting the ball. So to raise your batting average in a span of almost 2 weeks, 40 to 50 points, that's ridiculous. I mean, you're seeing the ball really well. Now, defensively, I wish we could have Rafael on the show to talk about Will Smith defensively, because I don't know, some of these backhanded balls that he is trying to do. Look, I get it. And this is when you call me, old man screaming at cloud. I was raised with Mike Scioscia behind the plate. Okay. Scioscia was awesome at blocking the plate. I don't see that from Will Smith. I feel like some balls get past him that should be past balls that are called wild pitches, but he could block it. But offensively, I have to give it up to him. He's hitting the ball really well right now.
We could do an entire podcast about catcher position defensively, and I don't want to, because I don't want to sound like old man screaming at a cloud. But
that's my role.
But it's one of those things where it's questionable, right? But at the end of the day, they're still finding a way to offensively get it done. And that's what the struggle was, right? The offense was struggling. The offense was at best was dragging. And what, something this week, turned the gears up, and here we are. We're talking about a dominating series, sweep for the Dodgers. Like, it's not even close. So, but on that note, Roger, what do you got?
I think you guys are missing someone.
Who's that?
Mr. Deluxe, Gavin Lux.
Yeah. Here we go. All right. So Babyface, you know this, right? Babyface credits Gavin Lux for breaking the slump, because Gavin Lux gave that primal scream. So all you have to do to break out of a slump is just show some emotion, right, Babyface?
Scream a little bit.
Yeah, he screamed. He got this team back on track. I mean, he's one of those guys that for the first month and a half, it's like, oh man, Gavin Lux again. Okay, get him out. He came up with this huge promise. Gavin Lux, he was number one prospect, not just in the Dodgers, like in the entire league. And so far he hadn't panned out, but over the last, couple of weeks, I mean, we're seeing what he can do. He's, some people were questioning, he feels more comfortable because he's at his natural spot at shortstop. So it's like, okay, what's going to happen when Corey comes back and he goes back to second? Is he going to go back, to, not doing so well? But I mean, you give him some credit. He looks like he's more at ease. He's getting his swing down, and 2 grand slams in a week. That's pretty darn good.
That's a very good point that you bring up, Babyface, because that is something that I'm very interested in seeing. Is when he does make that move back to second base, if that does affect his play. A couple episodes when we had a fellow Bleed Los Taquero in Jorge Castillo from the LA Times on the show, he talked about how Lux isn't really that comfortable at second base, especially with throwing. But to speak about how good he's been playing, you go back to May 14th, he was hitting 235. Now he's hitting 262. So this is another guy almost that has raised his batting average almost 30 points in a span of 2 weeks. So, but you got to answer this for me, Babyface, because this is a question that I've had since the beginning of the season. Why doesn't Gavin Lux get a helmet that fits him? Have you noticed the number of times that his helmet falls off?
Maybe he's growing his hair out, and he's because a lot of times the helmet pops off. Those guys do their head thing with the hair, so maybe he's kind of getting ready for that. So we might know in a couple months.
So do you think? I think maybe we just have to put a chin strap on him so he can look like Hypo Harry, from the old Saturday Night Live skit. You're the devil.
A chin strap. Wow. You took that all the way back to Pee Wee. As a fellow long-haired person, though, assuming he's growing his hair out, how dare you? How dare you?
I chose violence today, Alonso. My apologies.
You woke up choosing violence. Ironically, though, the Dodgers also did too, because do you know what their run differential was before Sunday's game?
It was at 60 something, wasn't it?
66. And that's with them in a slump. That's what's insane about it. And the only team that was ahead of them, take a wild guess who that was there, Juan?
The Padres of San Diego, the Show Pods.
At 68, plus 68. And listen, full disclosure, I hate these stupid stats, but they come in handy to give you, I will say they give you an indicator of where you're at. So, I mean, I was, I've said it before, I wasn't necessarily 100% worried. I was just worried because of the injuries, but this team was just too good to be slumping. They're just too damn good to be in this position. And, the Dodgers, even being only 70% healthy, still just went out and just ran through, 12 games and only lost 1. So, I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, what else can you even say about that?
Well, what I'll tell you is baseball is stupid. It just doesn't make sense, because while the Dodgers were slumping, who was the guy who was carrying them during that time? It was Justin Turner. Now Justin Turner is slumping. Justin Turner, you go back to May 12th, was hitting 307. Justin Turner is hitting 267 now. So, and Justin Turner was a notorious slow starter. So for him to have the hot start that he had this year was impressive. Usually come June is when Justin Turner starts turning it around. But I think this is why it's so important to have the stacked team that the Dodgers had, that when a guy like a leader like Justin Turner is scuffling, you have guys like Gavin Lux, Muncie, Will Smith that are picking this guy up and, delivering for the team. One guy that we haven't brought up, and he's been very consistent the whole year, but this is a question that I have for both of you guys. And I know this is very early. This is a hot take, but I'm starting to think it is more important to re-sign Chris Taylor than to re-sign Corey Seager.
Cannot deny that at all.
There, I said it. I mean, this guy plays everywhere, and he's hitting. And I used to refer to him in years past as the human strikeout. He has cut down on his strikeouts. I've just been very impressed with what Chris Taylor has been asked to do by the team this year. And he's delivering it. And I just can't imagine where this team would be without Chris Taylor.
I've said this about Chris Taylor, and I will say it again, because it's also the same theme for Julio Urias. Chris Taylor, if he played anywhere else, would be an everyday starter period, end of story, anywhere else. But since he plays for the Dodgers, he's a bench hand. He's a piece to the puzzle. Because I mean, anywhere else that dude would be easily starting. Same with ODS. ODS would be an ace on any other staff. If we saw it today, my man would be a 1-2 guy. Period. So I agree with you 100%. Can't disagree with you in any way. Chris Taylor must be protected at all costs from everything: COVID, car accidents, everything.
And shout out to Zach Lee wherever you are. Hope you're listening to the show.
Because let's not forget who was traded for Chris Taylor.
Exactly.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, dude, Chris Taylor's contributions to this team coming off of the bench and filling in these positions where guys have been hurt, nothing else can be said. I mean, he's one of those, he's a baseball player. There's just no other way to put it. Puts his head down, and whatever they ask him to do, he does it. I bet you if they asked him to pitch, he would pitch. I mean, that's just how much of a team guy he is. And I mean, even this year, he's hitting 279 with 6 bombs and 21 RBIs. That's a bench player. So again, that for the most part, that's your second baseman, maybe your left fielder, kind of guy. But I mean, this dude, that's what he's doing coming off of the bench. And how many games is he at right now? Well, he's got 140 at bats. So that's half of these games at minimum. So I mean, it's one of these things where it's like, hey, re-sign him. And he was a 5th round overall pick by the Seattle Mariners in 2012. Thank you, Zach Lee.
Yeah, exactly.
He's going to be one of those guys, though, that so many teams are going to probably just throw money at him and have him come and play as an everyday player. And again, the Dodgers are going to offer again that, okay, this is what we offer, the limited role. Okay, you play all these positions, but there's going to be a team that's going to be like, hey, Chris, here's what we got. Everyday center fielder or whatever, everyday second baseman. So I don't know, is that going to be something the Dodgers are going to be able to compete with?
Yeah, because he plays every day for the Dodgers.
Right
now, he just plays in a different position every day. And I mean, I get it, and Alonso could probably speak to this more than I would, but I would think there is probably some comfort in playing the same position every day. But there is a part of me that I would love to ask Chris Taylor, putting it out there into the world. Chris Taylor, come on the Bleed Lows podcast so I can ask you this. And that is it exciting that he is playing at a different position every day? We saw him at third base earlier in the week. We know he can play short. He can play second. He can play every spot in the outfield. I wonder if that, as a baseball player, just keeps you hungry, because you are at a different position all the time. But I think you throw whatever money you can throw at Chris Taylor, because he's still going to be cheaper than Corey Seager. And I just think that Taylor is, regardless at what position he's at, I think Taylor's better defensively than Corey Seager.
I 100% agree with that, actually, that I would say defensively, him and Gavin Lux are probably the 2 best gloves at that position, shortstop. And the other thing about Chris Taylor, he may not be the fastest guy. He may not even be the biggest guy. But the thing is that dude, wherever you put him, he's good. He's just good. And I think that's what, obviously what keeps him going is that they're finding a way to stick him in the lineup to get him to play every day. And obviously, as a major league player, you want to play every day, and that's the goal, right? I don't think he's complaining about his playing time, because I mean, he's played 42 games. I just had to look it up. And I mean, that's basically every day. So I misspoke when I said he's, played about half, because I mean, that's almost every single day. So it's one of those things where I don't think he's going to necessarily complain, because I mean, here's the other thing about Chris Taylor. When they play in an American League city, which they're heading to one, he can DH. If they don't have a spot for him in the field because they're happy with their defense, that dude can still DH. So it's just one of those things where it's that embarrassment of riches, because he's played second base, third base, shortstop, left field, right field, center field, and he's DH this year. Those are all the spots that he's played. So basically, he has played everywhere except pitched and catched in first base. So, I don't think he's complaining necessarily. I think more than anything, they just want to get him in there wherever they can. And that's going to be interesting to see going into next year, because as you said, you have that Corey Seager stigma, and Jorge Castillo said it, that he thinks that Gavin Lux is going to be the fit to replace Corey Seager. So does that mean that Chris Taylor automatically goes to second? maybe, I mean, that would make the most logical sense for me. Because obviously he's a really good center fielder too, but are you going to pull him for Cody Bellinger? No. So I think whatever it costs, just give him that money. Because as we saw in this offseason, they gave Kike and they gave Jock 1-year deals, and they weren't even for crazy money.
And Chris Taylor has one of the, I guess, the highest approvals coming from Clayton Kershaw. He said when he shows his son, Charlie, players, he wants him to be like Chris Taylor is one of the guys that he wants Charlie to grow up to be like.
And that's a solid example.
And you know what, Babyface? I don't want to downplay what you said, because you're right. If someone throws a ridiculous amount of money, it's going to be really hard for him to say no, because I don't think he's made that much money so far in his career. So, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to overpay, but I think the Dodgers can make it very appealing to him, if they can somewhat be close to matching those numbers with the fact that you're going to be competing for a championship every year here. Like, if someone throws, this is a random number off the top of my head, I don't even know if this works, but if someone throws $50 million at him, which is probably going to be a lot of money for him, but it's the Baltimore Orioles that are throwing it, do you take it? I mean, look at the places that Kike and Jock went. They went to teams that were like, I still think it was a mistake that Jock didn't take the White Sox deal. I think he would have been better off because that team is better than the Cubs. But Kike went to the Red Sox, and the Red Sox are competing. So they both went to places where they could still have a chance to at least get into the playoffs and a chance to win. I mean, it's just way too early. It's May. For all we know, the wheels could fall off the wagon and Chris Taylor could just start not playing well for the rest of the season. But just right now, everything that he has accomplished from the beginning of the season till now, I think the Dodgers would be hurting a lot worse than they already are if they didn't have somebody like Chris Taylor.
Well, and he's only 30. He's going into year 31 next year. And in the 8 seasons that he's been a professional ball player, 5 of them have been in the show, and he's made $15 million. We have to remember that everyone had to take a pay cut last year. So I mean, he's making 7.8 this year. I suspect if you give him, 8.5 to 9, maybe even 10 million a year, he'll stay. It's very doable for the Dodgers because they have a lot of money coming off of their books next year. The other thing is the Dodgers also value dudes that can play multiple positions, heavily. I mean, how many positions did we just name? We named all of them except first base, catcher, and pitcher, right? So he can play all of them. So it's going to be one of those investments that's well worth it. But most importantly, the offensive production that you get out of that guy, you're not going to find that on the market. Even if you were to go out and get a, just for argument's sake, we'll say like a Marwin Gonzalez or anyone like that, you're not going to get that same level of production because, as you saw with Edwin Rios, who can play multiple positions, granted he had an injury, but he didn't live up to the hype like he did last year, right? So there's always a risk as far as that goes. But I would be shocked, if I'm honest, though, if they let Chris Taylor walk. I would be absolutely shocked. Corey Seager, to Jorge's point, Jorge Castillo from the LA Times, I agree with him that I don't think they're going to re-sign him, but it makes sense to let Corey walk. It doesn't make a lot of sense to let Chris walk.
No, I agree with you. And I don't, before we start getting labeled as Corey Seager bashers, and now Corey is never going to come join the carne asada here with us. But I will say this. I don't know if I can prove this. I don't know if the numbers support what I'm about to say. But does it seem that the Dodgers are playing better defense with Lux at shortstop? Or is that just something, a figment of my imagination?
I think it's a figment. I think defensively they were there, regardless of Corey being in the lineup or not. I mean, the Dodgers are just, they're top to bottom on paper. They're far and above beyond any other team that you can think of. They're definitely one of the more complete teams, right? So no matter what, the defense was going to be there. I mean, that's one of their other bigger metrics. I just think what it comes down to is Corey, and Jorge Castillo said it also, to give him more credit. Corey Seager is a good baseball. He's a great baseball player. He's elite, right? but his defense is, as you have pointed out in the past one, is shaky. He can get those routine plays, get that going. But as we talked with Jorge, when you talk about Fernando Tatis's range, that's something that Corey doesn't have. Those are the balls that he wishes he could get, that Lux probably can get, with more reps at that position. But granted, playing shortstop in the major leagues, that's next level. We can sit here and compare to how Gavin might have done it, in 3A or 2A. But when you're talking, in the show, that's a whole other, we have to give that more than, 7 games that he's played in that position. And even in that, I believe Chris Taylor got 2 of them. So that the verdict is still out on that, I guess, that's the long answer for that.
Yeah. And, speaking of, our fellow Bleedlos taquero, Jorge Castillo, he's going to be joining us live from San Francisco to give us a brief update on the end of this series, right?
Yes. And before we dive into that, so Albert Pujols signed last week. We did not do a podcast because I was traveling. So that's why we're actually going to talk with Albert, or I'm sorry, with Jorge. That'd be cool if we could talk to Albert. But we're talking with Jorge Castillo of the Los Angeles Times. He's going to give us a little bit of a rundown of how that deal came to be, and also the acquisition of Yoshi. Oh, damn it! I already forgot how to say his last name.
Don't even say it. Don't even try it.
I'm not even. But Yoshi.
It's just Yoshi.
Yeah.
He is just Yoshi. He's like Madonna.
Like one name only.
Yeah, Madonna or Cher. So.
Well, he's going to talk to us about how that deal kind of came about, and without further ado, here's our good friend of the show, Jorge Castillo of the Los Angeles Times. Wanted to have you on because you broke the story about Albert Pujols joining the Dodgers, and I wanted to see if you can give us a little bit of detail of how that deal came to fruition so quickly.
Yeah, I think it was. I think what happened when Pujols got DFA. And surprisingly got released by the Angels. I don't think the Dodgers were necessarily thinking they would sign him. I think it was more just what happened over the course of the following week, and just how poorly the guys who were replacing other people were, the kind of like the guys that they didn't expect necessarily to depend on, they weren't playing too well. So I think they just figured out they needed some help, some depth. A guy off the bench, a guy who can hit some left-handed pitching, which the Dodgers also had trouble doing this season. And over the course of that week, they kind of convinced themselves that Pujols could be a guy. So from what I heard, they reached out that Thursday. Friday, they had a sort of a deal already in place. And Saturday, Saturday morning, he was at Dodger Stadium for his COVID test. And broke it that day. And then Monday, he was a Dodger.
Yeah, Jorge, so this is Juan. This was a move then out of desperation by the Dodgers?
Desperation? Yeah, I think desperation might be, that's one way to frame it. I think it was a matter of, if the Dodgers were 100% right now, if they had Cody Bellinger and Zachary Kinstry, and, they were dealing with so many injuries, I don't think Albert Pujols is a Dodger right now. You got to remember, when this happened, it's been over a week now, and it's just kind of been, but they basically agreed to the deal. They weren't playing too well. At least, they had a couple wins in their belt, but, they had just about 15 to 20. Things weren't looking too great. So, yeah, I think it was a team that was looking for a little boost. I mean, they also, they traded for Yoshi Tsutsugo that, around that same time for some depth. They were signing, they signed Nate Jones to a minor league deal. They claimed Phil Bigford off waivers. They were trying to, bolster their team. Their depth, not necessarily at the top end, because there are guys in the top end that are on the edges that will come back and help them out, but just more depth pieces. And I think, Pujols was a depth piece. And yeah, I mean, there's no way the Dodgers signed Albert Pujols if they were all healthy and playing super well. So, I guess desperation could be one way of framing it.
Well, just to follow up, I mean, the last time we had you on the show, you said that the Dodgers, maybe around the trade deadline, would be looking for a right-handed bat. Mm-hmm. Do you think once everybody is healthy, there's still a spot for Pujols and he is that right-handed bat? Or are we looking at Pujols unceremoniously getting cut again?
I think it all depends on how well he plays. Because he's a guy that's already kind of commanded some respect from guys in the clubhouse, obviously, right? He's a Hall of Famer. He's been in the game for since 21st season. I keep thinking about 21 years. It's a long time, right? Will Smith idolizes the guy. It seems like guys around the team just really like being around him so far. Dave Roberts Sunday said that he's already kind of guys around him already on their best behavior. They're trying to impress him, all that kind of stuff. He's the best hitter of his generation, or one of them. So I think it's tough to just cut a guy like that. But I do think he has to be performing well or doing at least his job well to stick around. Like as you mentioned, guys will be coming back. Cody Bellinger, Zach McKinstry. There are only so many spots on the roster. You also got Yoshi Tsutsugo. So it's tough to say. I think it really just depends on how well he's playing.
Do you know what were the other teams that had interest in Pujols?
No, I don't know of exact teams. I do know that there were other teams who were interested. I do think that the fact that he didn't have to move played a role in his decision. Just obviously being in Anaheim and already being in the area in Southern California helped out. Having to move mid-season, it's not just the guy who's moving; it's the family. If not moving with him, then after having to be without him for a long stretch of time, right? Like any other human being on the job or has to move for a job. So I think that played a role, and I think just the Dodgers, where they are right now, they're a team that's win the World Series, and I'm sure Albert Pujols doesn't mind winning. So I think those are all factors.
And Jorge Castillo from the Los Angeles Times joining us here for a few minutes. Real quick, obviously Albert had himself a pretty good, I would say, Dodgers debut this week. So did Yoshi. What can you tell us about the Yoshi deal and kind of how that came about, if you know anything?
I think it's just I don't know the details of that. I think the Dodgers, as I mentioned earlier, just kind of they were digging around, seeing what was available. And Tsutsugo had been designated for assignment, which means the Rays had 10 days to basically he had clear waivers. They could trade him or whatever. So he was on the market. The Dodgers were interested in him when he came from Japan before last season. There was some interest there, but Tsutsugo wanted more playing time, so he ended up signing with the Rays, from what I understand. And so there was interest in Tsutsugo last year. And when a guy like that's available, a guy who was a superstar in Japan. Now, obviously, the league in Japan isn't the major leagues. Guys that come over here and struggle as hitters. But we've also seen some success stories. We're seeing Shohei Ohtani, what he's doing right now with the bat, and over the years, the Matsuvis and Ichiros of the world. But this is a guy who's a star in Japan, and for whatever reason, with the Tampa Bay Rays, struggled. And he struggled the most against velocity. And the Dodgers think that they basically can fix him. And by fixing him, it's basically just getting him to get back to the swing, the mechanics that he had in Tampa. I mean, in Japan, not in Tampa. Basically, what happened was Tampa tried to change his swing. They try to take away his leg kick, which he had in Japan, so he could be better against velocity. And that actually hurt him. It made it worse against velocity, from what I understand. So they're trying to get him back into his leg kick, get his mechanics right, and they think that he can be a good bench piece. A guy who, he's basically going to replace Evan Rios playing first base, third base, left field.
So do you think once everybody starts coming back, I mean, you reported that we may see Cody Bellinger and McKinstry by next weekend. When we start getting more healthy bodies, you still see him staying on the roster for the Dodgers?
Yeah, that's another tough one. I mean, let's do the math right now in our heads. Right now, they're bench pieces, right? They need a catcher. So Austin Barnes / Will Smith. You got Matt Beatty. You got, with Seager at shortstop, Lux at second, Pollock at left. You got Chris Taylor theoretically as a bench player. So that's 3. And then you got Zach McKinstry. That's 4. So it's Tsutsugo or Pujols if you go with the 5-man bench, right? So it's going to be one of those 2 guys, unless McKinstry's the odd man out. So I don't know. It really, talking to Dave Roberts this week, he was really excited about the Tsutsugo deal. He made it seem like this is a guy that they can kind of fix and have him be a big contributor this year. But again, it's tough. Injuries happen. We're kind of assuming a lot of things right now. Guys getting back to full strength. no more injuries happening on top of that. So, but I think when these guys are full strength on paper, it's going to be either Pujols with Tsutsugo or McKinstry. And I just can't tell. I really don't know who would be the God man out.
Okay, well, last one from me, Jorge. Speaking about these injury fronts, what's going on with Mookie? Is this a serious thing that's going on with him, or is this just one of those just lingering little knick-knack injuries?
Yeah, I don't think it's serious. I think the problem is that he has like a few of these knick-knack sort of lingering things that are kind of hampering him this season, hindering him a bit. He hasn't been himself. Dave Roberts after the game today, Sunday, was asked, what happened with the shoulder. He said it flared up this morning, and he's been dealing with it for about a week, right? So he's been playing through it. Sorry about that. It's loud here in San Francisco. He's been playing through it. It's not that he can't play. It's just the problem is that he hasn't been able to be himself consistently this year. Because if you remember, early in April, he had a back injury in his 4 games. So he's kind of been banged up all season. And I think that back injury kind of impacted him a lot more than he let on. And I think he's also now dealing with his shoulder thing. So I don't think it's a serious injury in a vacuum. The problem is he has a couple of different things bothering him. And it's, different things have been bothering him all season. And we haven't seen the Mookie Betts that we saw last year, when he finished second in the MVP voting and did what he did in October.
Now, Dave Roberts also hinted that the Jimmy Nelson injury, he doesn't think he'll be out for long. Do we have any updates on Scott Alexander?
Yeah, so Scott Alexander, last I heard, was playing catch about a week ago. I haven't asked about Dave Roberts about that too recently. The Jimmy Nelson thing, yeah, as you said, it's short. He said it'll be a short stint after the game on Sunday. The problem is with Jimmy Nelson is he's had back, shoulder, and elbow surgeries in the last 3-4 years. So it's tough to, you can say whatever you want about it being a short stint, but you never know with a guy with that injury history. So, Jimmy Nelson's been really good this year. I think it's 16 outings with a 2-something ERA. And another guy actually who might be closer to return than maybe even Alexander is Bruce Gratterall, who threw a bullpen session here Friday in San Francisco. He's going to on Tuesday in Houston. And then after that, he'll probably go on a rehab assignment. So I think maybe by the end of the month, we'll see Bruce Gratterall back with the Dodgers.
And Jorge, last question for you. As you said, you're in San Francisco. Are you going to be in Houston? And if so, even if you're not going to be there, as you know, the Dodgers are traveling there. What do you think this series is going to be like, especially with fans there?
Yeah, I'll be there. I was actually there last year too when they were there in Houston. The only LA media member there last year was myself, and I'll be there this year. I don't know, man. I'm just curious. I'm curious on 2 fronts. Obviously, the teams themselves, the game itself, how that's going to be, but also just like a full capacity baseball, ballpark period. I haven't been in one since 2019, so having fans at the ballpark as it is at 50% or 33% capacity has been kind of it's been weird. It's been great, but it's also been weird. So I'm looking forward to that, just seeing how that's going to be. As for the game itself, the teams, man, it's playing Kershaw's pitching Tuesday and Trevor Bauer's pitching Wednesday. So those guys have their own histories with the Astros. Kershaw obviously has been outspoken about what they did, in cheating. The Dodgers feeling that they were cheated of a World Series, and playing Kershaw was right in the middle of that Game 5. What happened in Houston? He thinks the Dodgers think they were cheating, and playing Kershaw, he's talked about it a lot. He'll never forgive the Astros for what they did. And then you got Trevor Bauer on Wednesday, who wasn't on that team, but I spent a lot of time talking trash about the Astros and how he thinks they've, used foreign substances with their pitchers. He's been, he's gone at it with Alex Bregman on Twitter. He has his own history with the Astros. So I think it's going to be a super high. There's going to be a lot of tension. There's going to be a lot of energy. I mean, we saw it last year with Joe Kelly. He wasn't even on that 17 Dodgers team, throwing at Correa and Bregman, and the bench was clearing. And I expect more of that, man. Especially with the fans. Last year, that place was empty.
and I could feel the tension from the press box. I can't imagine this year what it's going to be like with a full stadium, a full ballpark. I mean, it's going to be crazy. I think it's going to be pretty crazy.
I'm looking forward to it just because, like you said, there's a lot of history there without there being history necessarily, which is that's what we all like, right? We like the quote unquote drama, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm just jealous that you get to be there in person.
Yeah. I mean, this year we've already seen it, right? The Padres, right? We saw the Tatis stuff. We saw it with Bauer, and we saw that sort of rivalry, that budding rivalry. And we saw this weekend. Friday, Bauer and the Giants fans, kind of the tension all weekend. It was like a high energy series between the Giants, two old rivals. And now the Dodgers going straight into another sort of tense, high drama situation series against the Astros. It's been a lot of, I think it just shows you how good the Dodgers are, first of all, is like, they have these kind of rivalries and kind of like tense series so early on in the year. But it's just really, it's fun. The storylines are there. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be super emotional. I think it's going to be super interesting to see what happens in Houston. And I think you can't overstate how important it is and how different it's going to be with a full stadium. The Dodgers have not played in a full stadium yet. And the fact that they're playing their first game with a full stadium since the 2019 NLDS against the Astros in Houston is like, it's pretty, like, you can't really write it any better than that.
No, well said. Well, Jorge, we really appreciate the time. Travel safe, and we will catch up down with you.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, Jorge, I'm going to check out Mofongos. I'm going to get arroz con frijoles, right? That's what that's my order?
Well, no. Arroz con gandules.
All right.
The gandules. Yeah, the gandules, right. And then you have to get mofongo, too.
All right.
You have to get the mofongo, too. You got to get the maduros. You got to get you got to get a bunch of stuff. Just go up and down the menu. Try to get as much as you can.
All right. I'll get everything, and I'll tag you on Twitter for the recommendation.
All right, man. Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Thanks you, Jorge.
No problem, guys.
Hey, this is Todd Lights, public address announcer for your Los Angeles Dodgers, and you are listening to the Bleed Los podcast.
Big thanks to Jorge Castillo of the Los Angeles Times for joining us. Interesting to hear him say, kind of how the Albert deal came about. No one really knows who those other teams are, but I'm kind of curious to hear your take. Do you think that Albert Pujols remains a Dodger through the entire season?
I think it's tough to say. I think what Jorge said is very true. It's all going to depend on his performance. If Pujols goes 1 for 4 every game, I'll take that, because Castillo is right. Once we start getting all these healthy players back, Pujols isn't going to be playing every day. Pujols is playing every day right now out of necessity because of the injuries. But once Bellinger comes back and McKinstry comes back, you're going to have to move Muncie back, over to first. Or when Seager comes back, you're going to have to move Muncie over to first, because you're going to move Lux over to second. I do see Pujols staying for the rest of the year because, and we've talked about this off air, the Dodgers have always seemed to have that one veteran that has helped to groom the younger guys. You go back to Chase Utley, you go back to David Freese. You had that one, and I could see Pujols playing the role of David Freese. I forget what year it was, but David Freese was really, really a very dependable hitter and actually starting a few games in the playoffs. So I hope that Pujols, keeps it up. I'm not expecting much. Like I said, if Pujols can hit 250 for the rest of the season, he's a better right-handed option, and it didn't cost you anything, because now if you have to go trade to get another right-handed bat, those are pieces that you're going to give up. Those are pieces that you could probably use to get a bullpen, to get a pitcher out of the bullpen. So I hope it works out. I have to admit, I was very shocked. I did not see that coming at all. I did not see the Dodgers getting Pujols, because I just thought, well, where's he going to play? But this is a very, reminder of like when you make plans, everyone starts laughing, because injuries have plagued this team all season. And the Dodgers are undefeated with Pujols. So because the Dodgers are not going to lose a game for the remainder of the season because of Pujols, I think Pujols is going to go into the Hall of Fame as a Dodger, right, babyface? You called it. I can't take credit for that. First game that he played as a Dodger, babyface called it. He is going into the Hall of Fame as a Dodger.
I mean, he has RBIs now and he has a home run. So great career in Dodger blue.
I just want to know how drunk you guys were when you text that. I'm genuinely.
Look, babyface doesn't drink. Okay,
right.
So
that's why I was curious if he just picked up the habit.
When babyface sweats, truth comes out.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And he called it. There are no lies detected with any of his statements.
And I think he stays the entire year because you got two guys on the roster right now that once Bellinger and McKinstry come back, they're gone. I think. I mean, Peter is going back, and I would think Noisy is going to go down. So there's two spots right there. And Pujols, I think, will still remain.
Listen, La Máquina, the machine, is a first ballot Hall of Famer, no battle. Doesn't matter if he would have retired in Anaheim or not. That he's going into. I mean, if you look up the first 12 years of his career, Jesus, like there's we will never see that again. And I know that's kind of a bold statement, but I don't think we're ever going to see that sort of a first 12 years of anyone's career ever again.
No lies detected, Alonso. If you look at it, and everyone who listens to the show knows how high we are on Trout. He has better numbers.
Yeah.
Those first 12 years that Pujols played were better numbers than Trout.
And we'll never see that again. But because of that, those first 12 years, and the career that Albert has, and he's a living legend, right? Walking into that clubhouse of superstars, all of them respect the hell out of him, and that's what that clubhouse needed. And what I mean by that is, you alluded to David Freese, you alluded to Chase Utley. Both of those guys in their own right are walking, living postseason legends themselves. And so, to command that level of respect from the younger guys, because let's not forget, this clubhouse is pretty young. Kershaw, Turner, Trevor Bauer, from there, it's like Mookie Betts and Blake Trinan. Those are your veterans, right? Kenley Jansen. So it's one of those things where, obviously all those guys in their own right, Kershaw, Kenley, all those guys, they've done their own magnificent things. The only guy that you can say is on par with Albert is Clayton. I mean, Albert is he's one of the nicest dudes in the game. He's a real one. And that clubhouse needs that. They need that veteran, that veteran presence, especially come postseason time, to get him through the thing. And I think he's gonna last, even like you said, I think he'll be one of those dudes that goes 1 for 4, 2 for 4, but they're gonna be significant hits. And as we saw in his Dodgers debut as an RBI. So I am expecting him to be here for the long haul. The Yoshi move is intriguing to me. And as Jorge said, the Dodgers were interested in him when he was a free agent. He's a superstar in Japan. Obviously, we know the history between the Dodgers and Japan. They've had Hideo Nomo, they've had Yu Darvish, they've had Kenta Maeda. So it's a long intertwined history. I find it interesting because a front office contact that I talked with when they made that deal, I asked them who's going to hit more home runs, Yoshi or Albert, and straight up said, the Dodgers are going to fix Yoshi, and he's going to hit more bombs than Albert. And that's what they want, right? That's what they need. They need that left-handed bat that they can kind of throw into the lineup when they can. Obviously, right now, because of attrition, they have no choice but to use him. But man, that's been a hell of an addition so far too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you guys heard what Kershaw said earlier in the week, right? No. The thing is with Pujols and with Yoshi, Kershaw had said it's nice to have new faces come into. So I wonder if, adding those kind of guys there, if it is kind of shaking up that clubhouse. And I've heard this from many people, and we've talked about this on the air. Pujols looks different. So maybe Pujols' on-field contributions may not be as drastic as maybe what Pujols is doing, what he's showing in the dugout, what he's showing in the clubhouse. To me, Pujols looks like a guy that has been given a second chance, and he's really appreciating that. And seeing that come out, I mean, many, you listen to Joe Davis in every game talk about how, Pujols was Will Smith's favorite player. What does that do for Will Smith to be able to play alongside your favorite player, your idol? Does it change things? I know, Babyface, you talked about this earlier in the season, especially that stretch where they lost the 15 out of 20 games. Was it complacency? Was it a World Series hangover? What was happening to the team? Maybe getting these guys to come in has changed something for this team, and it has lit a fire underneath their asses.
I mean, I would agree with that. They definitely needed something, right? And they got it going, and they got it moving in the right direction, because everything, whatever they were doing, like you said, someone for sure needed to either sacrifice the chicken or stop stealing whiskey. I mean, that's what it boiled down to. And, again,
no, it was just Gavin Lux needed to scream.
That's it,
right, Babyface? It was the scream.
It was a scream heard around the world. One in MLB at least.
Well, and I will say this: the Albert move, we didn't get a chance to dive into this with Jorge just because he had a run, of course. But that move 100% cut me off guard. 100%. It makes sense for Albert because his family is still there. He wants to be close to the family, but realistically, he kind of had a picking of, I would assume, 4 teams, maybe 5 that were in that general area that he could fly into in and out of. And the Dodgers, definitely were not on my radar as far as that goes for them to pick him. And same with Yoshi, the Yoshi move. Obviously, they DFA'd him, so it doesn't cost. It's kind of a low risk, high reward move on both ends. But I mean, Yoshi in his own right, he's no schmuck either. The Dodgers were interested in him. He ends up signing with Tampa. And I mean, before he came over, he had, I think, 205, 206, something like that, home runs in the Japanese league. And I think he was like a career like 280 hit or something like that. So it wasn't like, it wasn't like, oh, we're just going to pick this guy up and just see if we can plug him in somewhere. They kind of knew what they were getting out of him. And if there's one thing we've also learned about the Dodgers, that when they hear about damaged goods to a certain degree, they pick them up and they correct what needs to be corrected that somebody else couldn't figure out. A la Jake McGee, a la Blake Trinan, even Chris Taylor, another example. And here we are. And I mean, they're not crazy risky rewards or risky deals either, if you really think about it, because I mean, they're paying them league minimum. So all in all, though, I think they're moving in the right direction. But one thing that is not lacking anything is the Dodgers pitching staff. The Dodgers pitching rotation, starting rotation, I should say, they're the best in baseball. I mean, they should all be in the All-Star game. I don't give a damn what anybody says, because I mean, Trevor Bauer is 5-2 with a 1.98 ERA, 88 strikeouts, and a 0.77 WHIP, and that's just Bauer. Kershaw is 6-3 with a 3.18 ERA, little bit of an elevated ERA, 65 strikeouts with the 0.95 WHIP. Walker Buehler is 3-0, 2.78 ERA, 59 strikeouts with a 0.89 WHIP. And then Julio Urias is 7-1, 3.05 ERA with 70 strikeouts and 0.82 WHIP. Best rotation in baseball. That's not even close. But the insane thing is, it's not Kershaw that's carrying the rotation. And we've seen that in years past where it had to be Clayton that had to step up and carry, be the horse, right? Now Clayton doesn't have to be that guy. And I mean, granted, the 3.18 ERA is a little elevated from what we're accustomed to seeing from him. But even at that, it's still not even close how no other rotations even remotely close to how good the Dodgers are.
Well, all right. So how much longer before we say that Bauer is the ace of this team? I mean, his ERA is under 2. And one of the things that I love about this, and look, this is a guy that if he wasn't playing for the Dodgers, I'd probably be complaining about. So he's one of those guys that because he's on the Dodgers, you tolerate a lot of his antics. But I will say this, being able to see him every 5th day out there, one of the things that I really enjoy about watching him is this dude is fearless. He does not care. I mean, he was hiding from Roberts in the dugout because he didn't want to come out of the game on Friday. He pitched a league high, not for the Dodgers, but a league high 126 pitches on Friday. And that was in the 7th inning. The guy wanted to keep going. I don't think he wanted to. And And nowadays you don't see that mindset anymore. And I think it's got to do something to the team to see a guy out there just show that he's just not afraid, and he's just going to go out there, and I'm going to, if I'm going to flame out, I'm going to flame out. I'm going to go down swinging. And so I think I would love to see as the year progresses, what effect Bauer has on Buehler, because I feel, Buehler is our best postseason pitcher. And if Buehler, I think he already has a little bit of that in him. If Bauer can get it out more out of him, I mean, you're right. It's just right now. And we haven't even spent that much time on Julio. Yeah, Julio's ERA is over 3, but it just seems that lately, every time Julio goes out on the mound, he's dominating. And I mean, we've gone this far in the show without, mentioning the fact that the Dodgers swept the Giants. And I know that Babyface was not very impressed with the Giants this weekend. But look, the Giants, let's also just keep this in mind. Let's just pump the brakes. We didn't see Gausman this weekend. So we didn't see the Giants' best pitcher. And Gausman has been very successful against the Dodgers. So if we see Gausman, it might have been only 2 out of 3. But for right now, I will enjoy it because we swept the Giants. But this team was a team that was rolling. I mean, they had very good starting pitching too, and the Dodgers unloaded on them this weekend. Aside from Friday's game, the Dodgers offense handled that pitching. Now, mind you, it was a bullpen game for the Giants on Saturday, and today, I mean, but Scalfini's been pitching pretty good for the Giants.
I was about to say Scalfini has been quietly doing the thing. Alex Wood has been quietly doing the thing. And then they obviously called up old Dodger friend Scott Kazmir for Saturday's game, and that didn't. I'm sorry. No, wait. I'm getting my. See, we record this. It throws my days.
Yeah, no. He pitched. Kazmir was part of that bullpen game.
That's right. You're right.
Because
you're right.
the Giants literally just picked up his contract so he could pitch that game.
Yes.
And real quick.
Yeah.
It could have been what we discussed too. Giants used up all their weekend runs on Thursday. So they didn't have anything left for this series. That's how it works, right?
That is true, Alonzo. Babyface called it.
He did.
After the Giants scored 19 runs on Thursday, he said, that's a sweep right there.
And for those of you that are unaware, we have a group chat, and he said that in our group chat. We can screenshot it if there's evidence that needs to be presented to the to council. But be that as it may, I will say this. I know this is unconventional because this is a Dodgers podcast. The San Francisco, I almost called them the San Diego Giants. Jesus.
I thought you were going to call them the San Diego Super Chickens.
The San Francisco Giants, obviously, I'm not a fan of Madison Bumgarner. I don't like his bullshit that he pulls. And thankfully, we won't ever have to have him on this podcast to talk about that. But, historically, though, the Giants have always they've always had baseball players on their roster. Brandon Crawford, Brandon Bill, Buster Posey, they all quietly do their thing, right? And for the Dodgers to go in there and just shut them down, listen, there's no other way to put it. It's either, the Dodgers just turned it around at the right time, and I will take that. I will take that because, I mean, the Giants, I don't think this is the last we've heard of the San Francisco Giants, of course. But I mean, it was also fun to see, back to Trevor Bauer, to see him in a rivalry game, go out and do what he did. He's the perfect heel. He is the perfect heel. There's no other way to put it. And
he looked like Babyface out there on Friday, walking off the mound and walking into the dugout,
right?
Putting his hand to the ear, Hulk Hogan style. Yeah. That's something that, those of you can't see, but Babyface pulls that shit on us every time we do a show.
Anytime
he is the ultimate heel.
He is. And from time to time.
Lies.
Where? I am unaware of what you're calling lies. How dare you? But speaking of the perfect heel, we're going to see the babyface and the heel.
Oh, that transition deserves an applaud, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we call in the radio business a transition.
I'll be here all week. We're going to see the babyface and the heel go against the Houston Astros this week, Clayton Kershaw and Trevor Bauer. We talked to Jorge a little bit about that. I like what Joe Kelly said earlier this week. We didn't obviously talk about this with Jorge, but Joe Kelly straight up said, if someone throws a beer at me, I'm throwing it back. I would do one better. I would open the beer, drink it, and then throw it back, assuming it's in a can. And it's one of those things where I honestly, obviously, I'm excited for when the Astros come to town, right? Because that's going to be its own. There's no other way to put it. It's going to be a shit show. This is the first time that the Dodgers have gotten to play in Houston with the full capacity situation. And it's one of those things. Obviously, we have no idea what to expect, but it's going to be an intense environment because of obviously what happened last year. Over under, how many times do you think that they get into it during these two games? Because remember, for this set of games, it's only two.
I'm going to go over one. I think there will be an incident. Excuse me. I think there will be an incident at every game. There's two things I'm looking forward to in that series, because I do agree with you. I'm looking forward more to the series at Dodger Stadium. But what I want to see first is how many Dodger fans travel to Houston. I think there will be a number of incidents in the stands because I do think Dodger fan is going to show up in Houston, and there will be words exchanged. So I'm curious to see that. And then the other thing that I'm curious about is how the Dodgers bullpen is going to react in that series. Joe Kelly had that shaky start the first time he came back, but then he had two really solid outings. And then his last outing, he was a little shaky. I want to see what Joe Kelly does when he's in that game. I want to see what Joe Kelly does when he faces Correa, because Joe Kelly, like you said, Joe Kelly doesn't seem like he's a guy who's backed down. And what Jorge Castillo had alluded to earlier, Trevor Bauer has been trolling the Astros, and Trevor Bauer is not a guy that is going to back down. So that Wednesday game to me is going to be must-see television. I really want to see Bauer against that Astros lineup. The other reason why I'm curious about the bullpen, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this, I feel like Roberts has really been relying on three guys, and I get it. These guys are probably our most reliable guys, but I'm curious as to how soon that's going to start catching up on the Dodgers. And that is the way he uses Victor Gonzalez, the way he uses Blake Trinan, and the way Jansen has been using. Now, those are our best relievers. They all have an ERA under 2, but it just seems that those guys come in regardless. I mean, Blake Trinan was warming up in the bullpen yesterday, and that game was today he was warming up in the bullpen.
In the 6th,
and it was an 11-0. It was an 11-0 game. It's like, why put Blake Trinan out there?
So I think it's a combination of two things. One is those are the arms that he trusts, and two, he doesn't necessarily trust the other arms that are there right now. And not to say that like you can't count on them. There's just so much going on that it's like, if it ain't broke, they'll fix it. Listen, Kenley Jansen quietly is putting all of us to shame. All of us guys are like, this dude isn't going to be a closer anymore, myself included. He just sat there and did this. Like he just did one of
yes,
those.
Yes, he did.
And he's quietly gotten 11 saves with a 1.31 ERA over 19 games. Listen, all you can do is tip your cap to that, because on the last stat that you throw out is his whip is at 0.97 with 24 strikeouts. Listen, that dude is he's turning it around. All kudos in the world to him for getting it going, because if you have a guy like that you can use at the tail end of your bullpen, you just need a couple arms to get you, especially if your starters are going to go 5, 6, and 7 innings every night, where obviously today, I mean, Julio did what he did, and it's like, obviously, you were talking about Blake. I was a little perplexed by that, but maybe he was trying to give someone some rest. I don't know. But, it's one of those things where they're firing on all cylinders, and going into that Houston series, that's kind of what they need, especially from the bullpen. Going back to the original question about what I'm looking forward to, I am fully expecting Trevor Bauer to troll the hell out of the Astros. And that like you said, that game is going to be must-see TV. Because listen, Jorge said it too. Both Clayton and Trevor have history with the Astros, and for totally different reasons, right?
Right, but Kershaw's going to play it cool, while I don't think Bauer will.
I'm not afraid of. I'm not afraid to say this. Even I'm sure the umpires are going to warn Bauer, and both sides. Hey, don't do anything funny. I would not be surprised if Bauer hits anyone. And you know what? Obviously, the bigger scope of this, it's 100% MLB's fault that's why this shit's happening. If MLB handles this the way they should have before, then we're fine. I go back to if you've seen it on YouTube, it's when the Mets try to throw a Chase Utley, when Thor throws a Chase Utley, and they have the mic on the umpire. And I forgive me, I can't remember who the umpire is, but him and Terry, the former manager of the Mets, get into
Collins,
Terry Collins, thank you. Get into it, and they go back and forth, and they use some baseball lingo that no one really hears unless you're in the clubhouse, right? That's the perfect example of how MLB dropped this, because MLB, although I may not agree 100% that Chase's slide was maybe not dirty, it was a little excessive, but it is what it is, right? We're here now. MLB didn't do anything about it, and it forced the Mets' hand to deal with it. That's 100% clubhouse politics. So in this case, granted, last year happened in the way that it did, it went down, but they still haven't had anything come of it, right? So you can't expect the game to not police itself and not have guys step up and do what they need to do. And I fully expect Trevor Bauer to be that guy, because he doesn't like the Astros for a whole litany of other reasons. So I would not be surprised if Bauer is the guy that incites something a couple of times, and because they're going to get pissed about his sword thing if he goes out there and does that. They're going to get pissed about his McGregor walk, and he's obviously going to be the heel, taking it all in. And what it does is it sets it up perfectly for Kershaw to go out and do what he does. And I think the best way that Kershaw can go out and stick it to them and give him the big middle finger, he's just going to go do Kershaw things. And that's kind of how I expect that series to go, with the Dodgers taking both of them.
Babyface, come on. I want to hear from you.
I want to hear the real Babyface, though, not the reserved, Babyface gimmick. I want to hear Roger, who I know does not like the Astros.
Give me your real Trevor Bauer.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything's going to happen, it'd be more game 2, unless game 1 we see Joe Kelly. If we see Joe Kelly in game 1, then there might be some fireworks. I mean, game 2, like you said, it's going to be like, I mean, Bauer, anything he does out there, if he throws it high and tight to Correa is going to get all pissed and start crying that the ball almost hit him, even when it's like, a foot away or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think Wednesday is a game that's really going to be like you said, must see TV. It's for different reasons, these different pitchers, they don't like the Astros. All the fans are going to be, Dodger fans are going to be chanting, F the Asterix, which we do have a hat at bleedlos.com that you can check out. That's when they come to town, I think it's a hat everybody should be wearing. But that's just
and not only that, wearing that hat with the Joe Kelly Fight Club shirt that's also available on Bleedlos. I mean, it just hit me right now, Babyface. Next week really is rivalry week.
It is, because
not only are we playing the Giants, in a 4-game series at Dodger Stadium next week, but we got these 2 games against, and quote to a fellow Bleedlos taquero, Todd Lights, the Astrals. We've got 2 games against the Astrals and then the Giants. Are those not the Dodgers' 2 biggest hated rivals at this time?
Yes, and well done on the Todd Lights plug, by the way. Who, by the way, if you didn't catch it, records our intro now. So huge thanks and big ups to Todd for doing that. I will say though, I wish that we could find someone that's going to go to those games and just put a GoPro on them just to see what happens, because it's either going to be really bad, or it's going to be really just a good competitive atmosphere. I'm leaning it towards the former, not the latter, that it's just going to get out of hand. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's 100% MLB's fault. I don't give a shit what anybody says. MLB, not only did they mishandle it from the field perspective, but also they should know that this is kind of inevitable because they created this environment.
If I'm telling you, if Dodger fan travels, it's going to be ugly in the stands. I think it will get ugly there.
Oh, absolutely.
If they would have stripped them, I mean, it's a different. it's a different it's a different atmosphere.
100%. It's not even what the Joe Kelly thing doesn't happen at all, I don't think. And then now with what's incoming, I mean, I'm sure MLB is already telling these guys, hey, keep it G. Don't be going out there starting shit. But it's like, no, like you guys didn't do anything. Why should we care now?
We should follow up with Jorge to see if there is a warning to both teams before Tuesday's game.
I can almost guarantee you that warning was already been done.
It's already been issued.
I bet you the league office has sent letters, doing all that chicken shit stuff that they do instead of just dealing with how they should have. And I, for the life of me, even if I wasn't a Dodger fan, I would still find it disgusting how they handled that entire thing. Because I am still pissed and I get heated when I think of the immunity that they gave those guys when you see guys get in trouble for much less. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like, dude, it's garbage. It's just garbage. And I don't blame the players for trying to police it themselves, because that's what MLB forced their hand to do.
And then I know we're wrapping things up now. So just real quick as the out, I just want to ask you guys, what do you guys think about the Astros, basically going to Major League Baseball saying that they need to step in to stop all these fans from abusing them? Does that add more fuel to the fire? Does that give you more reasons to hate the Astros?
It would give me more things to talk shit on them about. Like if I was on the field, I think it's garbage personally. Like I said, I've said what I've said. They cheated. There's no other way to put it. They did what they did. There's, as Adrian Gonzalez told us, and it's known if anyone works in the game or has worked in the game that has sources, there's a lot more that they did that has not come out to light. So for them to sit there and do the whole, holier than thou thing, and then just expect to get a pass, from criticism, I guess is the best way to put it. That's chicken shit. There's that is a term that's used in baseball that's like used as a magic word. It's chicken shit. And to me, what the Astros have done, and even how, and I respect the hell out of Dusty Baker, I do, but for him to essentially, cry foul about that sort of stuff too, it's like, come on, man, like, what you're getting yourself into. And that's the thing that surprises me about him taking that gig too. He knows what happened. So for him to sit here and try to take the higher ground, if you will, the higher road, like, bro, like, what happened, what they did, and it's bullshit. It's just bullshit all around. And again, I go back to the example with Terry Collins and the Mets when they threw at the Dodgers. The umpire, as the umpire said, you got our asses in the jackpot. That just essentially means, I can't do anything. MLB did what they did. They said what they said. My opinion is different. There is nothing that I can do. All I have to do is make sure that you guys don't actually rip your heads off and that I don't get caught up in the problem. And that's the situation that MLB has put everyone in, not just the umpires, not just these two teams, anyone that wants to retaliate against the Astros. And for them to sit there and say that anyone's saying these mean things about them because they cheated, that's bullshit.
All right, last word goes to you, babyface. Close out the show.
I mean, Josh Reddick, he got a little bit of it, this past week, 15,000 fans in the stadium. He heard it. I mean, now imagine in August when the Astros come, there's going to be 50,000, and I think Dodgers might even let more, probably get like 60,000 in there, I think, just to boo them. So
no, you're right, because they're those standing room areas, right, out in the center field plaza.
Yeah, I think they're going to do whatever they can to get extra people in there, I think, for those games. So, I mean, it's coming. I mean, if the Astros think they've had it bad so far, it's coming, and it's coming quick.
And that's the thing too. We haven't even harped on it yet. This isn't Houston, where this is probably the most friendly environment that the Astros are going to be around until they go to LA. We saw obviously what happened in Anaheim, and kudos to those Anaheim fans too. It's been reported some of them are Dodger fans, but still, they gave them the business. And they should expect that just about everywhere they go, because what they did, not only is it egregious, but it spit on in the face of the game. But I agree with Roger. I think they're going to call the fire marshal and be like, hey, can you not come to the game for the next week? Because we don't want to get shut down for being oversold.
Let me tell you, when the Astros come to LA, if I was the Dodgers, the clip that I would play on the big screen before the game started is the clip with Kurt Russell from the major motion picture Tombstone, telling the Astros, you tell them I'm coming and I'm bringing hell with me. That's the clip I'm playing because those two games at the Ravine are going to be lit, and those tickets are going to be very, very expensive.
But you know what? No matter how we look at it, and kudos to you for quoting my favorite movie. I just don't, for the life of me, I just don't think how the Astros didn't think that their request of that was going to backfire in some way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but be that as it may, I'll get off my soapbox because I'm still pissed about that. I hate cheaters so bad. But on that note, big thanks to our friend of the Carne Asada, Jorge Castillo, for joining us as he walked down the mean streets of San Francisco. The audio wasn't great, but you have to remember my man was walking down the street. And huge thanks again for him to join us. Please go follow him on the socials if you haven't. Likewise, please follow our socials at Bleed Los Pod on the Twitter machine, at Dodgers Beat. Huge thanks to everyone for joining us, for subscribing, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and leave a review to the Bleed Los Podcast. The Bleed Los Podcast is a Dodgers Beat production.